Investigators have concluded that Arturo Gatti, the later Arturo Gatti, I should say, his death was ruled as a homicide and not a suicide. So that is huge for the boxing world in terms of the mystery that's revolving around Arturo Gatti's death. I mean, you remember that summer, just with Alexis Arguello, Vernon Forrest, and Arturo Gatti. I mean, they all mysterious deaths, huge, just really rocked the boxing world. And just to know that the case still hasn't been resolved is really just disheartening because he was such, they always refer to him as the blood and guts warrior. It was just very hard for fight fans to actually believe that he committed suicide. There's a great HBO documentary with Brian Gumble. Believe he did it a few months ago, and things just weren't adding up. So I hope that they can find some, continue to find new evidence. But as of today, they have concluded that it was a homicide, not a suicide.
And I think that'll ease a lot of people's, hearts and minds. But now it's all about trying to find the killer, actually, and we'll see how that actually goes.
Absolutely.
Just a little bit of local news here. I mean, this weekend, a Friday night, actually, Joshua Gomez of El Paso and Albuquerque actually lost a split decision to Denver's Corey Alarcon. Alarcon, if you are unaware, is the only other loss on Ortiz's record there, but Alarcon actually, won by disqualification against Ortiz. Also, on another local note, Bloomfield, New Mexico native Joseph Gomez, now 17-4-1, was destroyed in one round by Alfredo Angulo. We had a Bloomfield, New Mexico, and I really didn't even pay attention that Angulo was actually coming back that night. So what do you think about Vanes Martirosyan finally calling out Alfredo Angulo? Vans, he's training with Freddie Roach, and I think he's about 30-0. It's about time that he finally fights a big name.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, Angulo, I really, we were talking before, I think Angulo is a really tough fighter, and he's one of them. He's my type of fighter. I mean, this guy's, if he can go ahead and knock you out, that's what he is going to do. He's not playing around. He's trying to get in there. But his inactivity, I don't know for what specific reasons, that's not going to be acceptable on the road to stardom. I mean, he still hasn't fought that big fight yet. I think that I'm looking forward to making him a possible fight with Saul Alvarez. I think that would be a spectacular fight, but I don't know with his Angulo's activity. I think that this next fight would be idea for him to start to get back on that road to stardom and to lead up to some big fights because I think the guy's got a great chin and I think he's definitely got the heart to win. So we'll just have to wait and see what he does.
Yeah, that 154-pound class is just insane right now. You got, the local guy Austin Trout, you got Miguel Cotto, you got Martirosyan, you got Angulo, and you also got Canelo in there, and it'll be interesting to see. And hopefully Alfredo can actually get his immigration status together there with his visa. And, maybe that fight with him and Vanes can actually be done here in the U.S. And, hopefully they can actually come through. Will, did you have anything else for tonight?
I just, on the last point, I just wanted to ask you in terms of the Super 6 tournament, as it's coming to a conclusion, October 29th, Ward and Froch are going to go ahead and finalize this thing. And I just want to ask your opinion. Do you think it was worth it? Do you think, out of the tournament, what would you say has been or have been the most significant fights that we didn't have to have a tournament for, that maybe the guys could have just fought? And I'll go ahead and go first, is basically, I love the fight against Ward versus Kessler. I think that most hardcore boxing fans, they knew Ward was a good boxer, but maybe possibly not tough enough to pull it off against Kessler. And he just destroyed him, and it was just like, it was an eye opener. It's like, okay, this guy is definitely for real. And there was a good war. And speaking of Kessler, was just really disappointed that he pulled out with the injury, and then a few months later he's fighting again outside of the tournament. But I also thought that, Kessler had a great fight against Carl Froch. And then, of course, the Arthur Abraham disposing of Jermaine Taylor. And as we go to the final fight with Froch and Ward, I don't know about this tournament. I think that initially, it was a great idea. I like the fighters involved in the tournament, except that Lucian Boutte was not involved. But then the replacements to me were just, you know, tremendously disappointing. I mean, Alan Green, all the talk, all the hype. I mean, his performances were just utterly pathetic.
Yeah.
And, you know, and Glenn Johnson, of course, you know, he's that road warrior, that journeyman, the underdog. But, you know, in his opportunity when it came to, you know, Froch, he really didn't show up either. So I just wonder if we could have bypassed all this and just gone straight to the good fights. I don't know.
I definitely think so. I mean, at first, when we thought about it, it was a good idea. I think they learned for it, and that's why they had that bantamweight tournament at just 4 men. So, I mean, you know, you like storylines for fights, but this tournament had way too many storylines, and I thought the best out of this is, you know, a couple of things. Andre Ward came out of this as a more, I guess, as a bigger name. And if he wins this, obviously against Carl Froch, one of the top 20 fighters in the world, if you ask me, he will come in with more notoriety and maybe move up in weight or maybe meet Sergio Martinez at a catch weight. But, I mean, those guys are a little big for Sergio. But also, I thought that Mikhail Kessler and, you know, and the Carl Froch fight is one of the best fights I've seen in the past 3 years, to be honest. So, I mean, those are a couple of things that actually stand out of this. But could we have gone without it? I mean, the idea initially was a great idea. There were a couple of good fights. That Jarrell and Froch was a very close and competitive fight as well. But I think these fights could have been done. These guys were pretty restricted to just fighting one another and had, you know, and were restricted to just a showtime. And you had other fighters fighting on HBO, for example, Boutte and other guys at that weight class, or guys that could have come down to that weight class fighting on different networks. So that's how I feel about that.
Absolutely. And you think about the tournament, too, is just, you know, to follow up with your comment there, is that the fighters whose careers actually were ruined from this tournament, in my opinion. I mean, it's one thing to lose, but, I mean, seriously, their careers are actually ruined. I mean, Jermaine Taylor, I mean, there's talk of him coming back, but he just doesn't look very healthy in the way that he got knocked out. Andre Durrell, you know what I mean, with Arthur Abraham getting disqualified, and then Miguel Kessler, you know, with his eye, and he pulled out, but now he's fighting again, which is horrible. And then Arthur Abraham, you know, supposed to be, you know, this guy with this great defense and just, you know, this crazy punch. I mean, he looked horrible. So I think all of those guys of which I just mentioned, I mean, I think their careers are, I mean, maybe despite of Kessler, he might be able to do something, but all the rest of them, it just seems like it's over.
Definitely. So, yeah, just to wrap up the show, as a reminder, UFC 134 is happening Saturday night, Facebook, Spike TV, and then the live pay-per-view. We'll probably have a breakdown when Justin's here. And I think that's about it. I mean, I just wanted to thank Ryan Maquiñana with CSN Bay Area for coming on. Will, did you have anything else?
Nope, I just want to thank Ryan as well.
All right. Well, for Justin Goodrum, who's not here, get that paper, man. Will McClary, I'm Jorge Hernandez. You've been listening to The Low Blow on NMCombatSports.com.
Peace.
Sounds like a guy with a Hispanic accent to me.